Recently, there was a big change in Alabama regarding how adoptions happen. In fact, our whole adoption code changed at the beginning of 2024. So here's to keep in mind the things you need to know. In Alabama, you may be a step parent who wants to adopt a child that belongs to your spouse. You may be a grandparent who's adopting. You may be a non-related party who has had custody of a child. There's all kinds of different situations where you can adopt a child. After the adoption law changed, now even a step parent has to have what's called a home study for the adoption. That means you've got to have a social worker come in and check out your home to make sure you're an appropriate person to be able to adopt the child. That never used to be required, but now under our new Alabama adoption code, it is required. And so adoption can be happening for a range of reasons in your family. Many people choose to adopt a child simply because they want to finalize and formalize this parent-child relationship because you already have the child living in your home, you already love the child, you're already providing as a parent. But here's the great thing about an adoption. It makes the child legally yours just as if that child had been born to you. And that way, even the child's birth certificate becomes new. So you are listed as the parent on the birth certificate. Maybe you're a stepdad who's going to adopt a stepson. You already know you love that child. You're taking care of that child. You don't even call him a stepson. You call him one of your kids. He doesn't call you stepdad or John. He calls you dad. And the great thing about an adoption, it takes that legal process and brings it home to your family where now, formally and officially, that child is your child, just as if that child had always been part of your family. And the love you already have is now made a legal relationship where that child's able to inherit from you one day, just like your biological children could. If you and your spouse divorced, you could maintain custody or visitation with that child just as if it was a biological child. Adoption is fantastic. Because of the new adoption code, there are a lot of additional hoops we have to jump through. That's why you've got to have a seasoned attorney who can work through this process with you to make sure that all of the additional steps you have to go through can all get accomplished, not just in the most timely way possible, but also in the most stress-free way for you and your family. Because even when you have a great thing in the legal process, like an adoption, which is going to wind up in a really good result, it still can be stressful because of the money involved, because of the length of time you have to invest in it, and just because you got things going on in court and nobody loves that. But when you have a team working for you who can help to get you through this process and make sure that child who you already love is legally yours forever, that's something special. So adoptions could happen for a variety of reasons in Alabama, but I know the reason for you is personal, and that's why you need to work with someone who can take you from beginning to the end and make sure that every little box is checked as you go through this really intricate process that's in our law now, but to make sure you don't miss anything, to make sure that at the end of the day, not only is that child's birth certificate different, but that child's life is different because they belong to you as part of your family forever. So what is the process for an adoption? How does it happen? How do you go from a child who you knew or a child you have custody of to your own son or daughter? We start out with what's called a petition for adoption that lays out who you are, who the child is, what the relationship of the mother or the other parent is, or even how you obtained custody or how long this child's been living in your home. There's a lot of things we have to lay out in the petition that will basically tell the court what you want. You can't pay for a child in Alabama, so you've got to lay out an affidavit stating that you haven't paid any money for that child. You've got to have an affidavit stating that this child has lived in your home for a sufficient amount of time. There's a lot of things that go into the process of an adoption that will take you from just having custody of the child to the child being legally your own child. There's a lot of processes that have been put in place with the new adoption code that came into effect at the beginning of 2024. So now all those processes are going to become part of your life. A layperson, no matter how intelligent or educated or well-spoken they are, probably wouldn't know all the steps to go through just because it's a very detailed situation through the court in Alabama. And so as we work through the process for an adoption, we love taking a family all the way through from the beginning to the end of that process. Maybe it doesn't happen as quickly as we'd love all the time, simply because there's so many things to do. And the home studies and the things you have to do in the process can take some time. But I know that the investment in your time and your money and the investment for your family is going to be worth it when that child can look at you and call you dad. So some people face challenges in adoption because either they're adopting a child that is the child of their spouse, and you have another parent, whether it's the biological dad or mom, that still wants to be involved in some way. They can't because they have either had their rights terminated or they have some kind of visitation, but they're not exercising it. And we have to go through certain steps to make sure that this problem isn't going to create an issue in your adoption. If their rights have been terminated, it could be as simple as making sure we get certified copies of those orders from the juvenile court to file into your adoption court. And that may happen in 2 different counties at times for various reasons. Sometimes the parent's rights have not been terminated, and we have to get that other parent served. That can create issues if they try to file an answer or an objection to the adoption. Then the adoption basically goes on hold. We skip over to the juvenile court and file a petition to terminate the parent's legal rights, and then come back and pick up with the adoption. Sometimes we run into problems with adoptions, and it's not really a problem, just something to keep in mind. If a grandparent has a right of visitation with a child, we have to make sure they get notice of the proceedings, and sometimes that adoption can leave in place the grandparent's visitation rights. So there are all kinds of issues that a person can run into in an adoption, but here's the good news. None of them are anything you can't overcome. You can work through all of these issues if you know how to do it and you work through it in the right way, and in the end, you can still get a good result, even if problems crop up along the way. So you may wonder, what are the legal requirements for an adoption? What has to happen in order for it to happen? Well, first of all, you've got to have a relationship with the child. Most often, adoptions happen through a step parent. We see a mom or a dad who's remarried, and that stepmom or stepdad effectively becomes this child's other parent. And a lot of times we want to formalize that in a step-parent adoption. So you have to have a relationship with the child, but it doesn't have to be a stepchild. It can be a grandchild who you're adopting. I've many times even seen great-grandparents adopt a child. There have been at times strings of adoptions where a grandmother has adopted her granddaughter. And then that granddaughter grows up and she's not able to take care of the child for whatever reason. Maybe she's young. Maybe she's not financially able to. Maybe she has other problems going on. And then I've seen great-grandmothers adopt their great-grandchild. And so now you have that granddaughter is the grandma's biological granddaughter, but now her legal daughter. And then her child, that great-grandchild, can then also become the great-grandmother's legal child at that point too. So we have these that happen sequentially sometimes for various reasons. So you got to have a relationship with the child. You also have to pay the court a filing fee. You've got to file the appropriate petitions. The child has to live in your home for a sufficient amount of time. And then finally, there can be certain requirements for home studies. It's a little bit different for a step parent versus other people who are adopting the child, but still you have to have now a home study to show that you're a suitable person. You've got to file certain affidavits saying that you've not paid any money for this child and things like that, and file a lot of appropriate paperwork that we can handle for you. And we would love to walk through the adoption process with you, because even though it's doable, there's a lot of legal requirements that we have to meet, and we would love to work through that with you.